So today we are going to run you through a shoulder session. So Jase is just over 8 weeks out now, so he's starting to feel the pinch, aren't you, Jason?
a small slight of fatigue.
He's feeling the pinch now, the diet. So we're going to help him get through this session. So shoulders, we last trained together back in Manchester a few months ago, didn't we? And it was a very good session, so I want to do that here. So the first session that I'm getting sort of filmed over here now, hopefully providing a little bit more content moving forward. So I'm just going to run you through the session as a whole at the minute. So shoulders is going to be a little bit more side delt focus. For me, I always like to actually warm up with some external rotations. For me, like any big guys are very internally rotated, so the sort of shoulders like roll forward. If we can help just obviously with the mobility side of things, open that sort of shoulder joint out. I think from like an actual aesthetic point of view, like if your shoulders are internally rotated, you're not going to get the same cap in your delt. So opening out the shoulder, just a little bit of a warm up, and then we're going to hit 2 side delt exercises. Probably a dumbbell to start, utilising like a full range of motion. And then I'm probably going to use the Atlantis side raise. I like the Atlantis side raise, but what I actually do at the minute in that is actually stay in the length and range. So it's more of like a partial range up to halfway and keep the sole tension on the sort of side head of the delt. Once we've sort of got a lot of blood, pre-exhausted the side delt, we'll then go into some pressing movement. I think we're going to utilise like the Smith press today. So I always say, like, if you are going to pre-exhaust the side delt and you're going to do a little bit more sort of isolation work to start, like obviously your ability to stabilise the movement is nowhere near as good. So I would never really do like a free weight dumbbell press after them. If I was going to do a dumbbell press, I'd always do it when I'm freshest at the start. So that's how that's going to be set up. So we'll do 2 sort of side delt isolations, a free weight and then a machine, and then we'll go into a Smith press. At the minute, I don't know what's your working volume at the minute?
It's not as low as 6 to 9, it's about 10 to 12.
Yeah, so he's working around a 10 to 12 rep range. At the minute, since working with Patrick, I'm doing like both a top set and a back off. My top sets are literally straight sets, and then my back off is usually with intensifier. So he lets me pick the intensifier of choice. So it can be muscle round, it can be cluster set, it can be a rest pause, a drop set, depending on where I am in the session and obviously what suits the exercise. So I'll sort of talk you through that as we go. One thing I am going to say, and you're going to slate me for this. So I've never said this in my life, but I am doing not reps in reserve training, but I'm not
10 reps in reserve.
No. You'll see it's not reps in reserve. I'm taking no force reps. So
oh yeah.
I'm not taking force reps now because
I feel like it actually takes the tension off the muscle.
Yeah, I feel, and it hammers your central nervous system. So like if you class your energy in a session as like a fuel tank, every sort of set is chipping away at that fuel tank. So my idea is trying to maximise every single exercise. And what I was finding, and like sort of the feedback I've got from Patrick after sending a few form videos, is my like last few reps, like yes, it's hammering myself and it's doing a lot, but it's taking away so much from the rest of the session. So it's about trying to obviously utilise and get the most out of every exercise without just trashing yourself on like one press and then not getting the most out of everything else. Also, what I've found since doing that, it's got a complete correlation with increasing appetite. So because my body's generally less stressed, my central nervous system's like obviously not as fatigued, overall fatigue's a lot lower. And actually because cortisol's lower across the week, I'm actually able to eat a lot more food. So it's actually having a really synergistic effect in that, because anyone that's known me, my big downfall in off season is not being able to eat, and we've kind of come to the conclusion it's probably because I'm taking far too many force reps and trashing myself in training. My body's...
You see a common trend, I think you get this with your athletes as well, when they say after legs I've got no appetite. That's simply because your cortisol's high, your central nervous system's fresh, because legs is the biggest muscle group, so it's typically the hardest to train. So when you look at it from that aspect, it does make a lot of sense.
It does make sense, yeah, of course, like because everyone loses their appetite, and it's like they wonder why, because they've expended the most energy. And yes, taking force reps expends energy, but if stress is that high and cortisol spiked, it has a massive implication in your ability to uptake nutrients, digest food and all that sort of stuff. So that's sort of how the session's going to be set up, and then we'll sort of do some rear delt stuff. At the minute I don't really do a lot of front delt isolation, I kind of save that from the presses, and then I'll probably finish off with like 2 rear delt movements just to finish. I think rear delts are one of them that I think a lot of people don't put enough emphasis on. So the more emphasis we can put on a rear delt, I think from pretty much every angle, like side shots especially, it completes your back double rear, and I think it's one of the most overlooked like small muscle group. Yes, it's very small, but I think it makes a physique look very, very complete. So that'll be the session for shoulders. I am actually going to tag hamstrings on at the end, but Jase, you're not doing that today. I did him yesterday, so I'm going to do some hamstrings after. But we probably won't get filmed, but that's my split at the minute, because these are two of my lagging body parts, so I'm trying to bring them up with a little bit more frequency. So we'll get going, talk you through the session as we go. I've got my intra on deck. Where's your intra, Jase?
I don't use any intra.
He doesn't use intras, he's hardcore. Does Jamie give you intras? No.
Nah, I genuinely don't use them. I don't get on with them.
Yeah. So I've got 20 grams of essential aminos, 40 grams of carb powder, 10 glutamine, 10 creatine, and that is my intra workout. So we'll talk you through the session as we go, talk to you a little bit about form, cues of movements, because I want to use these videos obviously to show training intensity, but also kind of educate people on like how we should be executing movements to get the most out of sessions. So we'll get cracking and catch up with you in a little minute. So just warming up with some external rotation, just to sort of basically warm up the shoulder joint. Recently I've started to realise like how immobile my joints are. Like I have big shoulders, and I think a lot of bodybuilders do, but all we're doing is slapping a load of muscle over the top of the shoulder joint, but the actual joint itself is not that strong. So actually being able to sort of externally rotate, like I struggle with 1.25 kilo. You can press 70 kg dumbbells above your head, but you can't actually externally rotate. So I think actually doing, movements like this, actually opening up, and like, obviously that's going to emulate like when we're hitting back row biceps and stuff like that. And obviously getting that opened up before we start training, it's going to encourage so much more blood flow. And obviously for me, it'll elicit more hypertrophy. And even in a short space of time, the levels of changes of like the roundness in my delts I've seen, because I'm actually a lot more opened up, is like big, like noticeably significant in like actual check-in pictures. So I know it's like something that's neglected with a lot of people, but it's always start like your push movements with stuff like that. And I guarantee you'll probably see a really quick level of progression if it's something that you've never focused on before. One of the things I really like about the seated is like you can almost come under yourself, so you'll see me like almost lean under myself. And I always try and think about keeping like your little finger at the top of the movement, and that's always going to emphasise sort of the side delt a lot more. So as opposed to sort of opening up like this, you're going to start bringing in front delt. So if you really want to sort of isolate the medial head, it will feel heavier, but keep your little fingers at the highest point, scoop underneath you, and then come right to the top. So warm-ups are literally just like, and this goes for like every set, like 6 to 8 reps, something like that, just getting a feel for the movement. We don't want to do too much damage and like pre-exhaust, because we're only doing 2 work sets, so we want to be as fresh as we possibly can for them top 2 sets. So enough to feel the movement out, enough to get blood in the muscle, enough to get everything sort of activated, get the central nervous system and anything firing, and then we go into our top working sets. They're heavier seated, aren't they?
Heavier, much heavier seated.
They are heavier seated, but that's because there's zero momentum. It's not about just moving away from A to B on stuff like this. Like your side delt is so small of like an actual muscle, so I think you've got to be very sort of refined and tuned in. I think accuracy is the key with side delts. Taking the grip out of the movement, but my forearms are fucked. I actually had dry knee.
We've actually got the same therapist, and he did say your forearms are fucked.
Yeah, my forearms are in a bad way. So I did some dry needling yesterday. I've got bad tendonitis through here, so it really affects training biceps. So anything at the minute I can do to offload it and not actually have to grip a lot, it's just going to help reduce inflammation in the area. So I'm really trying to rehab it at the minute, utilising everything I possibly can, along with peptides, BPC 157 and TB 500 are always a decent shout for soft tissue.
What is your dosage recommendation for muscular injury for peptides?
So like with anything, I usually titrate upwards, but I think it needs to be like, for me it's 2 milligram of TB 500 3 times per week, and that's what Patrick's got me on at the minute, and then I'd have to get it up on my phone, so I'll get it up shortly, but it's titrating the dosage upwards week to week.
People run into this issue and they don't actually understand how to utilise peptides.
Yeah,
for sure.
and a lot of people just think like, like 1 week is going to do it. It needs to be like for a considerable amount of weeks, and it's not just doing it in isolation, it's doing it alongside like physio work, dry needling, because the idea is to take the inflammation away from the area and actually encourage sort of stress relief from it, and then you start building it back up. So obviously the peptides are there to just sort of basically accelerate the process in terms of the recovery. So rest time in between rest pauses, I ain't getting my phone out and timing that shit, so just 5 deep breaths and then go back in. So don't fucking hold your breath, just deep breaths.
You get it halfway point. 2 more. Yep. Good.
Good. Moving easy. 2, nice. 4, 5, 6, let's go. Good, 2. Good. Yes. Last round, failure now. 2. Good, 2, go on. Big reps. Good. Keep squeeze, keep squeeze. Yeah. So top tip for anyone with aminos intra. So drink half of them pre-workout. The reason is get your blood like sort of enriched with nutrients first. So obviously if you've got aminos in the blood, you've got your creatine, you've got your carbs. Obviously the carbs are going to give you an insulin spike as well. There's no point having all your fucking nutrition sat in your bag. Get it down you first, and then when you start pumping blood to the muscle, you're going to actively start pumping the nutrients to the muscle. It's a bit of like a Miller-Sarchev sort of approach that, but I do definitely think it works. Obviously, if you've got a lot of carbs into a workout, it gives your body a chance to process it, drop your blood sugars back down, so you're in a parasympathetic phase post-workout, so you're ready to absorb nutrients. If you've got a load of carbs in your intra, you're chugging it down on your last exercise, and then you're having a post-workout meal, you're just piling food on top of food. So get it half of it in, and then get it sort of finished mid-workout. So with this, like you'll see on Jase's set now, we're just warming up, we're staying in the length and range. So as I said, like the free weight exercise, we're going through the entire range of motion. Here we're literally staying just in that short and range, so the length and range, and then holding at the midpoint. So you're literally keeping that tension solely on the side delt. Because sometimes I feel like on machine raises, sometimes when I call them all the way up, I start to feel it in my traps and stuff. So that short and range, and you can actually go a lot heavier on the movement as well because you're not doing a full range. So you can really overload that part of the muscle. And honestly, like the feel in your side delt, the connection is unreal. So on the back off set, what I usually do though is superset it. I'll drop the weight and then I'll go into full range as well once the side delt's pretty exhausted.
Up.
Drop it.
Off?
Yeah, about half.
Fully now, full. Come on. Central nervous system shattered.
There's a difference. On little isolations and on drop sets, you can go to failure. When I say about like going to failure in a lot of training,
his CNS is...
No, I'm not backtracking. If you do it on like hack squats and leg press and big pressing movements.
CNS is shattered, he's not eating tonight.
No, I'm fucking eating, I'm eating. On a side raise, it's different. Hack squats, leg press, deadlifts.
Yeah, there's the smaller movements you can take.
Smaller movements, we can take it past failure because you're not going to smash your central nervous system. So, right, so obviously, as you can see, there's been a lot of side delt volume. So now we then go into the pressing movement. So we're going to go for a Smith press, and so we're going to actually work on this now. Like everyone's going to say, oh, you know, I can't lift as much weight. I'm not asked. I'm not asked about what weight you lift. Like you will feel it so much better in your delts. You're not going to start to feel like your triceps, your elbows are going to be warm. You're not going to start getting niggles in your shoulders.
Better muscular tension as well after pre-exhaustion.
Oh yeah, 100%. And like I said, like I wouldn't ever pick like a dumbbell press or a barbell shoulder press now. It's got to be a machine, something we're locked into, because your stabilization of the joint is nowhere near what it would have been at the start of a session. So just be wise with obviously the movements and obviously the way in which you sort of program them within a session. So on compounds, like I would always say, rep range when you're warming up, a bit like unlike isolation because it's a little bit easier. Like I'd always do like 3-4 reps, even though like our top set's going to be like 8 to 10. I'd always do a little bit fewer reps just so we're not pre-exhausting too much. With my range of motion as well, you'll see that I'll come all the way down. You don't need to do that, but for me that's like just a comfortable position because I've got the shoulder mobility to do it. But if it doesn't feel comfortable, don't go past that point. As long as you put your elbows below this point and round to your chin, I think that's a good enough range. So they're the sets I'm not taking any force reps. Like usually, Jase will know the old me, I would have been like 2 more.
But you have to realise how forced he took it, because 98% of people, that would be them taking force reps.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
And this is why, like, when we say failure, it's hard. We can't say to clients like go to failure because, or don't go to failure, because it's having the perception of what true failure is. And I think a lot of people don't.
That's a lot of people's true failure.
Yeah, that is. So it's obviously just being instinctive with what actually your perception of failure is. And obviously we're at the level where when you are very strong and you lift a lot of weight, 1 set can do a hell of a lot of damage in terms of muscular failure and actual like CNS stress and all that sort of stuff. But not in an offensive way. If you've got just a 15 aside, you know, you could go to all failure plus 2 force reps and you're not going to trash yourself. So it's all relative. The stronger you get, the more sort of conscientious you've got to be in terms of your actual failure point. So the intensifier of choice on this one is we're hitting around about, I don't know the actual number, 10 continuous reps. So no lockout, no pause at the bottom, 10 continuous constant tension on the delt. We're then going to rack it. We're going to take a quarter of a plate off, and then we're going to do pause reps. 2-second pause in the stretch position, and then squeeze up. So another little variation. In like client programs, I call it like a 10 plus 5, or do 15 plus 5. If you've done it on the leg press, like 15 or 20 continuous reps, drop a couple of plates and then 5 pauses. Mate, that will bury you. That will bury you.
Stay there, you still. 1, 2. 1, 2.
One more.
1, 2. Yep.
Ooh. 1, 2. Oh, good. Slow and negative. That's better. 1, 2. Oh, nice and slow on the way down. 1, 2. Oh, I've got you. 1, 2. Go on, all the way up. Fully lock it. Fully lock it. Don't stop. Good. Woo. So this rotation for me, like I said, I do 2 rotations. One will have 2 presses in, and then this one is a lot more isolation based, so a lot more emphasis on the rears, the sides, and actual sort of like the cap of the delt. And then obviously my other rotation, to do a 2 rotation training program, will be 2 presses, has a bit more of a dominant sort of like power based movement. So generally like a dumbbell press and then like a machine press after that. A little bit of a quirky setup that. So I actually don't sit on the seat, so I find it really hard to connect with my rear delt. So when I do a reverse pec deck, I actually stand and like lie into the seat, because my sort of thinking is like as soon as I start leaning back and actually retracting my scapula, the tension goes away from my rear delt. So if I can actually lean forward and angle myself into the seat, I can keep the tension really on my rear delt. And if you do struggle to connect with rear delts, what I would actually say is change the tempo of the movement. And I don't mean by using a slow eccentric, I mean a slow concentric. So the actual lifting phase, instead of moving it explosively backwards, think about dragging your elbow slowly backwards and really sort of like squeezing the muscle as opposed to moving weight from A to B. So I quite like a light load and very isolated and contracted. Just try and get the maximum contraction I can. And usually work in a slightly higher rep range, so sort of like 12 to 15s. Bit of a different one as well on these. I like to actually do like my lighter set, so I'll kind of build the weight up and like accumulate it. I just find if I can go to failure on like a lighter weight and then go heavier, I find I connect better with that heavier weight. I do the same on traps as well. Like with shrugs, if I go straight into a heavy set, I can't connect. Get loads of blood in the muscle and actually pre-exhaust it, I find the connection so much better. And I don't mean just warming up, I actually do a working set in a higher rep range, then go heavier and then bring the rep range down.
Come on. Eke out one more, eke out one more.
So just gonna hit one more rear delt, and that is delts done. But like I said, rear delts I think are just so overlooked. So what do you like to do for, do you like any dumbbell? Do you not like dumbbell? I like to incorporate like one movement that's more of an isolation, like squeeze. So obviously reverse Pec Deck or reverse cable fly, and then I'll do into more of a compound movement. So I'll actually do something like a reverse cable in that sense, sorry, a reverse dumbbell. So standing here like that. So obviously with this we're working the shortened part of the motion, we're really focusing on the squeeze part, and then when we transition into that it's more of a compound movement, so just moving the weight from A to B, and then we'll probably hit like a rest pause or a drop set on there, and then that'll be finished. But fucking very good sort of shoulder session up to now. So finish strong with one more movement, let him get his post-workout meal because he's starving, and I will probably finish up some hamstrings. So I think a good point to make with these is like you always want to lead with your elbow. So literally don't think about what your hands are doing. All you want to think about is bringing your elbow back and leading. So nice and high, and the position in which the dumbbell's coming to is sort of like in line with your chest. If you bring it too low, you're going to start to activate your lats. So you want a nice wide elbow path. So it's kind of like a hybrid between like a row and a fly. So you're kind of rowing it up, but then coming wide at the same time, and then just leading. And honestly, like the connection I get from a rear delt on these is crazy. Like, a lot of people do it as well. Like if you had a bench like this, if I didn't have a cap on as well, leaning your head on here, getting a set base, and then doing it from that point. So that way you're a little bit more stabilised. So that might suit someone that's 6 foot fucking whatever you are. 6'8".
My lower back like fucking pulsating.
So yeah, I'm gonna go into a work set now, but like I said, I can go heavy on these, so I do find it like a good movement to like actually overload the rear delt. It's not as isolated, but like I said, if I isolate it first, I've got a lot of blood in there, I get a really good connection. So I usually do an isolation and then come into these.
Go, Joe.
Let's go. Good. Go on, improvise, you haven't got another dumbbell.
Feels fucking amazing.
Wide. Go as wide as you can go. Pull high. More towards your neck. There. Good. Let's go. So we're hitting up some hamstrings. I don't think we're going to record it because Jase did hamstrings yesterday, but we're going to record my section of the hamstrings part. So it's a bit of a weird session, like shoulders and hamstrings, but it's what Patrick's got me on. So I used to do back and hamstrings like a full posterior session, But because back is so taxing, when I finished back and then went into hamstrings, I was just half-arsing it, to be fair. So because hamstrings are muscle group that I want to bring up, I want to put it on a day where I've got a lot of energy. So even though delts is intense, it doesn't trash me like a back session would in the same sense, because it's just not as expending. So I'm actually doing sort of quad movements on my quad day, and then I'm following it up with hamstrings, and then on shoulder day I'm actually doing a top of hamstring. So it's only literally 2 exercises here today, and this is where I'll actually put my hip hinge movement. So I do a single leg isolation movement just to get some blood in my hamstrings, get them firing, and then I'm going to do a sort of a hip hinge. So I'm going to do a dumbbell RDL. So only 2 movements, 1 isolation working the shorten range, and then 1 working the lengthen range. And then obviously on my quad day, there's no hip hinging because it's too taxing to put it on that day. And then actually just do on my back days now, it's just purely upper back and then it's triceps. So I'll sort of post my split in the description, so you've got a bit of an understanding of how it's set up. But I've only been on it for a few weeks since I've been out in Dubai, and honestly, like, it's doing wonders for me. I feel my recovery's a lot better. I feel like I'm getting the most out of every session. I think that's all it's got to be. It's how can you structure a way in which you can get the most out of every single muscle group. So just going to take you through 2 sets of these, and then it's going to be 2 sets of RDL with dumbbell, and then that'll be literally it. This machine, unreal. Use the plate loaded one first, but this one's different. Oh, that hammer strength MTS one is unreal. Like the actual peak contraction, like usually the plate loaded one drops off in the short range, but the contraction at the top on that, unreal. Probably the best like single leg hamstring movement I've used. Just a warm up. So as you'll see on these, what I'm actually doing is using a toe elevation. So for me, like your tension should be going, so the bulk of the weight should be going through your posterior chain. So if you can elevate your toes, it's going to make you feel like it's going more directly through your hamstrings and obviously posterior, and I just get such a better sort of hamstring connection. Obviously a lot of people struggle when it comes to RDLs because, fuck me, I'm out of breath, man. Because they say to me, like a lot of clients, like my lower back starts to come into this, so if we can use a toe elevation, it's going to put the hamstrings naturally in like a lengthened position, and you can actually get a much better connection. So pay attention to the tempo I'm using. A really slow eccentric, but then I'm pausing in the stretch position, and then I'm actually using like a neurological connection to think, right, contract my hamstrings to move the weight, as opposed to just, right, let's get back to the top. So think about actually contracting through your hams to initiate the movement, and then obviously squeezing through. You'll also see at the top of the movement, I'm not fully locking my hips out. I do at the end of the movement when I get fatigued, but for the bulk of the reps, so say if I do a 10 reps there, I might do 7 or 8 reps there until I get to the sort of near failure, where I'm actually staying. So from here up to here, and I'm not locking through my hips. So a continuous amount of tension that's staying through the hamstring. And I feel like if you don't allow that tension to drop off your hamstring, there's no possible way you can't connect with it. So just a couple of tips there, because I do think like this is one movement that is so key to hamstring development. You know, obviously doing hamstring curls is great, but obviously we're working the contracted part of the motion, we're working the short arm range. This is actually working the hamstring in the length and range. So actually to maximally develop your hamstrings, obviously it's made up of 3 different muscle groups. I need to get my biology book out, come back to me on that one. But it's made up of 3 different muscles, so to hit all muscle heads properly, we need to work it both in the lengthen portion, i.e. via hip hinge and a stretch portion, and also actually a curl movement as well. So make sure you incorporate in both. And if you don't connect with these, use the tips and make sure you do, because it will really bring up your hamstrings. Ah, 20 reppers to finish, minging all the fucking tension. But yeah, that completely wraps up hamstrings. So we'll catch you with Jase in a minute, wrap up the session. Well, that was a good one, very, very good. Every time I do this session, shoulders and hamstrings, I think do my shoulders and I'm like, oh, I've not got the energy for hamstrings. I get into it and I end up having such a good hamstring session as well. So it does work so much better than when I do it with back, just because I've got the energy to put into stuff like that, which you do need when it's a compound movement. So that is a wrap. So I hit shoulders. Obviously I've touched up some hamstrings, but you didn't partake in that part of the session. But it was a very, very good session. And obviously it's good to see him coming in the level that he is at the minute. Obviously it's mad to see how like I seen him pose last Saturday, and like the rate in which he's changed since then, and like it's pretty crazy how fast you're coming in right now.
What's cool is even in today's session, I've took a lot of take homes away, because when you train in your own method, you get so comfortable in training. So a lot of the intensity amplifiers, I'm like, fuck, you know, I feel so much more volumized. So these are things I'm going to be incorporating, and I think you should be incorporating them as well.
Yeah, 100%. And like we said, it's like, you know, trying to show you how we train intensely, but actually how there's a thought process behind it. It's not just kind of going in and just kind of throwing junk volume at everything and just kind of, you know, hoping it sticks. It's kind of like thought process and actually methodically planning it out and actually, you know, planning that volume like quite meticulously and then taking that forward into our training. So like I said, I will put the sort of my training split in the description. We're going to get a few more of these done soon. But yeah, if there's anything you want to see from us, any other sessions, me put Jase through some legs. It might have to be a show after his show. But yeah, we will definitely get that in for you and see where that goes. But yeah, appreciate you watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz, and I will look forward to seeing you next time around.